Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 91, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Last 2 chapters of this story. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. While Haruhime made her way back to Orario with the guidance and protection of my weaker summons, that I couldn't rely on, I was mentally preparing myself. As other than the Juggernaut and Alfia, the wall of flesh was going to be the strongest thing I would have met in my life. And the wall of flesh wasn't just a being, it was a force of nature. It was the world of Terraria's guardian, and once killed, the Halo would break into the world to protect it from further harm. But I was as prepared for it as I possibly could. I had all my buff potions, I had gun summons, my accessory slots were filled with all the previous boss's souls from the Fargo's mod. It was time. If the Terrarian could do it without a fauna, I most certainly fucking could it, with one. The very world seemingly went silent as my grip on the blood-stained doll tightened. And then it happened. Like a drop of thick blood falling into a puddle of thick slop, making a terrible, ominous noise, I made the very world of Gakai and Damachi shudder. The wall of flesh outside of Terraria and in reality was ginormous. To call it a living being was an understatement, as I truly couldn't see all of it. From the ground to the very clouds was a wall. A wall of blood-red exposed muscular flesh, with countless massive eyes each larger than an elephant was tall. And of course the mouths. The mouths were the most terrible thing, as each and every single one of them was original, different in many ways from size to teeth shape to having tongues that were forked and others that clearly looked like they had spiky hairs on the tongues like cats would. And without a roar, a snarl, or declaration of murderous intent, the wall of flesh moved towards me, like an unending tide, as the sea of monstrous flesh as tall as the very clouds and stretching beyond the horizon. I could see in the distance all but flowed at me like a fast-moving tide of lava. The mouth snapped at me, and I began the process of whittling down the wall of flesh. Powerful explosions of glowing water cut through the flesh. Sir Fluffykins I dropped countless activated grenades upon it, and I realized how the wall of flesh worked as a being. It was a massive singular creature, but as I blew it up, froze it, and my summons cut and further blew it up, I realized a couple minutes into the fight, as I used my fledgling wings to fly away from the wall of flesh and dodge its slow-moving lasers it was shooting at me via its many, many eyes. I realized during the fight that it ever so slightly was becoming smaller with the damage being done to it. But as I did more damage to it, the faster it seemed to move. Whereas at the start, I could just power walk and skip to avoid the slow-moving, high-temperature cursed lasers, now I needed to be at a jog to keep the endless wall of flesh from gaining on me. I used jester arrows and crystal bullets that did massive piercing and area of effect damage to the wall of flesh via my Hellfire Bow, and my trusty mini-shark. Oh, which Sir Fluffykins was also using his own mini-shark as he flew atop the Wolfram drone he was so prone to, being how he was a sentry and thus couldn't move from his position, sadly. And that demented squirrel didn't miss. He gallantly guided the drone through a hail of laser fire and shot into the eyes of the wall of flesh, all the while chittering his unknowable speech but obviously cursing the wall of flesh's ancestors as being someone who was descended from fornicating with a goat. That or your mama jokes. Sir Fluffykins had an issue with constantly using those bombs, spells, exploding arrows, and countless bullets. My several summons boosted by my own buff potions and the Fargo Soul's modded boss souls effects were doing phenomenal damage to the wall of flesh, with my fledgling wings allowing me to dodge the wall of flesh's lashing mouth monsters and the lasers without many issues. But the wall of flesh became enraged, as it seemingly hit a form of critical mass when it seemingly lost a quarter of its great height that had previously reached the very clouds. It shuddered, and like a bruise crossing its raw red flesh, it became purple. And with a sloppy lurching noise, its speed literally doubled. No longer could I take it easy in using my fledgling wings. I was all but sprinting and flying at high speeds as I occasionally turned back to shoot spells or bullets into the boss. All the while, my summons honestly did the bulk of the work. As the wall of flesh and all the bosses honestly just seemed to ignore my summons. Their animalistic and instinctual desire to see me a splattered mess would render them all but blind to other entities, even other humans, unless I left their sight and senses. And thus, only then they would focus on and go after other humans and sentient beings. Finally, though the wall of flesh made a noise beyond its gurgling moans of pain that escaped its countless mouths, I grunted and I held a boulder in my arms to drop me out of the air instantly as a pillar of light screamed through where I just was, cutting through the surrounding forest and creating an after-effect explosion of smoke and flames, making a several-mile-long trench that was 50 meters wide. And that beam of death was seemingly the last splurt of its energy as it reverted back at its grasping fleshy chompers that grew endlessly from its flesh to soak up our attacks and, of course, the constant barrage of lesser bolts of lasers trying to pierce through me. But with that final death throes of an attack by the wall of flesh that would have killed me with doubt should it have landed, I was in the clear. With each bullet and attack, the wall of flesh became weaker, slower, and just less of itself until it reached the end. A box of hard flesh, harder than the stone of the dungeon, was all that remained of the wall of flesh that was still trying to bulldoze me over, and it was only when I took a pickaxe and broke the black box that a loud gurgling rang out before ending with a strangled whisper that told me the wall of flesh had died. The fight lasted more than 20 minutes. 20 minutes of a literal tidal wave of an eldritch flesh monster trying to crush, eat, vaporize, or tear me apart. As I stumbled into the box and grabbed my items from killing the wall of flesh, I literally just collapsed face first into the ground in sheer exhaustion, and my vision went dark, with the last thing I saw was Sir Fluffykins the First chittering loudly at me.